So as we are approaching towards the end of earnings season, the name that everyone is going to be watching is, of course, Nvidia stock. Now, Nvidia stock is likely to have a record $300 billion swing in market cap, which is pretty much higher than what we've seen from the last previous earnings. And this is what the option markets are pricing in. But in this video, I want to go ahead and highlight what are some things that we should absolutely want to go ahead and parse through once the earnings comes out, and what is it that the market is actually looking for. Now, pretty much the idea is pretty bullish for Nvidia. In fact, I recently shared this report from Morgan Stanley that just came out on what are their thoughts on Nvidia, and within the Push and Profit private group, I kind of just went down and provided what exactly Morgan Stanley was saying. And in this long message of me dissecting of what they said within the Push and Profit private group, I mentioned how Morgan Stanley has a price target of about $144 for Nvidia, which is slightly higher than the mean consensus price target of $137.11, with a range spanning from $50.30 to $200. And Morgan Stanley's positive outlook is reflected in their overweight rating for Nvidia. And I went ahead and mentioned that the reason why there's a lot of optimism for Nvidia's earnings and what Nvidia stock is likely to do is because of large language models, right? We're currently in this AI race where all these other companies are continuing to spend and invest in their AI segments of the business. This way they could go ahead and reduce profit margins, and pretty much Nvidia is the main beneficiary, or one of the main beneficiaries, in this kind of AI rush, right? They're the ones selling the shovels, essentially. And you guys could see this little quirky image over here of Microsoft, Google, Meta, everyone buying the Nvidia shovels looking for gold. And that also includes Tesla, right? We've heard Elon Musk in the last earnings meeting, right, mention how they're investing heavily in these chips as well. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and share everything that I said within the Push and Profit private group in regards to this Morgan Stanley report, mainly because it's a bit too technical. And so if you want to have access to things like that, make sure to check out the links in the description below, because one of the links is going to be a link to join the Push and Profit private group, where every single day the markets are open. I share a daily briefing talking about macroeconomic events and what are some ideas that we like. But again, this is a video about Nvidia, and one of the things that we want to be mindful of is pretty much the forecast, right? What are the forecasts for Nvidia? What is the forward guidance? And one of the things we want to hear about is the Blackwell chips. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's essentially their upcoming series of graphic processing units, GPUs, which is supposed to be faster and much powerful than Nvidia's current models, making them great for tasks like gaming, video editing, and of course, artificial intelligence, which is pretty much the main driver for the big push that we're seeing in Nvidia. Now, from a technical perspective, we were slightly just 9% below where the previous highs were back in June. And so, of course, this big swing that could potentially happen if we had a positive earnings and forward guidance could put Nvidia stock right back into the peak that we saw back in June, letting it hit new all-time highs. And so this is, of course, going to be something that many market participants are going to be watching, especially as it's going to be a huge driving force for what we end up seeing within the technology sector, right? Because we recently have been seeing a lot of diversification taking place within the markets, where we're seeing consumer staples have a lot of capital flow in, and we're kind of seeing the big concentration in tech kind of just fizzle out a bit. And so that's why we're seeing tech sell off. But this earnings from Nvidia could potentially restore a little bit more of that concentration that we've seen earlier in this year with tech. And so that's why, even if you're not someone who is invested in Nvidia or don't plan on trading Nvidia, it's still something that you want to go ahead and watch. Now, one concerning factor that I do want to kind of put out there is that when we look at where we are in terms of volatility relative to where we were in terms of volatility from previous earnings, we are slightly higher. And so that's something that could potentially sway things with Nvidia, right? There's a lot more volatility taking place, especially as we're heading towards September. And historically speaking, September has been a pretty red month for the markets. Of course, previous price action is not indicative of future performance, and we know that this September we do have rate cuts coming in, so that kind of throws in a lot of different kind of topics into the mix. And then of course we do have pretty much a big debate coming out soon as well, so that's going to go ahead and kind of throw more of a mixture into everything going on. But I want to go ahead and highlight what one analyst over at, mentioned over at CNBC, and kind of highlight a couple of things that are pretty bullish that even other analysts are watching.
NVIDIA reports results tomorrow after the closing bell. Joining us right now with more on what we can expect from the chip maker, the potential impact on tech stocks, what Wall Street is expecting, is Ray Wang. He is Constellation Research Principal Analyst and Founder. And Ray, really good to have you in studio with us. What is Wall Street looking for? What does NVIDIA have to deliver?
Well, at the moment, they're priced for perfection. And so everybody's waiting to see, will the Blackwell chips be delivered on time? Will they not? What's going to happen going forward? And it's all focused on the forecast. When we do market checks, we see that the earnings are going to be pretty good because almost every tech company has been actually investing in data center chips and in the AI chips. And on the other hand, every company budget, when we talk to our 1,000 CXOs on the market, everyone robs cybersecurity budgets to pay for AI.
This is the point I wanted to get to. We're going to talk more about NVIDIA in just a second, but that came as a shock to me, this idea of robbing Peter to pay Paul when you're taking money out of cybersecurity and putting it into AI. Is this going to be a mistake that they all look back on later if there's a huge cybersecurity attack or something that gets through?
Well, the big thing that's happening in cybersecurity is about post-breach resiliency. You know you're going to be breached. Are you better at actually recovering? And so they're making the guess that AI might get them faster to cybersecurity as well. So
okay.
Both are happening.
So it's not necessarily robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is a situation where you're beefing up AI in order to try and help your cybersecurity situation?
Exactly.
Okay, that's less scary to me. That makes more sense.
So essentially what was recently mentioned on CNBC is that there's a lot of investments from a lot of these large corporations into the AI play, right? And it's also not just because they're trying to make their profit margins a bit greater, but they're also trying to reduce risk in cybersecurity by actually decreasing what they're investing in cybersecurity and kind of investing that into the AI segments, which is also another interesting aspect. Now, I want to also highlight this graph right over here, highlighting how pretty much NVIDIA's weight and the S&P 500 has risen a tremendous amount ever since the release of ChatGPT to the public. And this is pretty huge because, of course, everyone just thinks of ChatGPT as just something that makes you write better emails or maybe helps you summarize things. But the reality is a lot of companies have already publicly mentioned that they're embedding ChatGPT into what they do within their companies. For example, one example, and we're seeing this with a lot of financial institutions, right? What they're doing within their call centers, right? Let's say you call your bank, hey, I have a problem with my credit card. What they're doing is they're embedding ChatGPT for their employees, where when you call into the company to go ahead and make a complaint or talk about an issue, ChatGPT is listening to the call and then automatically providing the employee which resources to better help that specific situation. And so we're seeing that this is reducing time spent on the phones for a lot of these call centers. And it's not just for financial institutions, that's just one aspect that just, since we're talking about, finance and stuff like that, a lot of banks are using it. But regardless, a lot of companies are using this in their call centers. And of course, this is good because it's going to help reduce the time on the phones. And hopefully what these companies are looking for is not having to go ahead and bring in a lot more employees in the future, as you could have a reduced workforce with better resources that could kind of tackle the time. Now, of course, from a labor perspective, that's not good. We're seeing, Silicon Valley and pretty much California have this exodus of tech jobs because, frankly speaking, a lot of companies are embedding AI, and it's not to kind of provide this doom and gloom, perspective that, AI is going to take your job. It's just AI is enhancing a lot of jobs, not just in tech, but in pretty much a lot of different fields, and that's contributing to a much less, need for workforce, right? We're seeing workforce kind of reduce, and that could also be a challenge. But of course, this is not the video to go ahead and talk about that. This is a video about NVIDIA and how pretty much we're going to continue seeing this trend of companies using GPTs or AI, and of course needing the chips, right? Again, NVIDIA is selling the shovels in the gold rush, and so a lot of these companies, they're salivating to go ahead and help reduce whatever they can to boost up whatever they can for the company. And so that's why we're likely to see a very positive earnings for Nvidia. But the real outlook is going to be, or the real, what the real problem that we're going to really want to listen to is essentially the forward guidance and what is kind of the time frame for those new Blackwell chips, right? So, is there going to be any like issues with the timing of them, any delays with them coming out? So that's something that we want to take a look into. But with that said, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop and just talk about the market from a technical perspective a bit further. We want to just go ahead and cover a couple of things taking place with the broader markets as well. So let's go ahead and hop into my laptop. But just before we do so, just a friendly reminder, if you have not done so already, make sure to tap that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future videos, and also make sure to hit the like button as it really does help out with the YouTube algorithm. And with that said, let's go ahead and hop into my laptop. All right, so we're in my laptop taking a look at Nvidia, and we see that it had a little bit of a green day for today, which is good, it's positive, and I want to go ahead and highlight why everyone is pretty much watching Nvidia, right? For example, if we take a look at RSP, which is the S&P 500 equally weighted, so that means all the companies in the S&P 500 having an equal weighting, we see that yes, there was a bit of selling pressure yesterday, but it wasn't crazy, right? But if you take a look at the QQQs, which is the NASDAQ index ETF, and you look at yesterday, the selling was much prominent. And if you go back to Nvidia, again, the selling was much prominent. And so Nvidia is kind of being the leader for tech, and it's mainly the main driver for what the markets are going to be doing, especially when you consider that the S&P 500 has a huge weighting with a lot of these mega cap tech names, right? And so we'll want to see if Nvidia has that positive earnings, because of course that could help propel. And now we're looking at the S&P 500 non-equally weighted, right? I don't want to confuse anyone. So this is the S&P 500 where it has more weighting to the larger tech names. Again, you see this is more red than the equally weighted, right? Because the equally weighted, everything's equal. But again, Nvidia has a huge weighting, and so that could potentially put the market back into new all-time highs that we had back in pretty much mid-July. And so that's something that a lot of individuals are excited about. If we go back and take a look at Nvidia, something that we see from a daily time frame, if we zoom in, is that there's little volume relative to price above like 131. And so if there's buying pressure after a positive earnings, well, that could push the order books up very quickly and get us quickly back to above 140. And so again, everyone is going to be watching Nvidia. It's almost funny because we have memes like this coming out where someone's making a parody of the Wolf of Wall Street saying the name of the company is Nvidia. It's a cutting-edge high-tech company that's bigger than Canada's GDP. It's so massive that CNBC has a countdown for its earnings, and Goldman Sachs says it's the most important stock of the planet. Everyone and their grandma owns a piece of this action, so if they miss earnings tomorrow, the world could collapse. How many shares can I put you down for, right? Just kind of like a parody of how everyone's watching this. We also have people, and this is directly just posts I'm seeing on X. People are doing watch parties for Nvidia's earnings. It says, does anyone want to do an Nvidia earnings watch party in NYC? I'm thinking of renting a bar in, I'm thinking to, maybe I'm reading this wrong. I'm thinking rent a bar space. Yeah, I probably wrote that wrong. I'm thinking of renting a bar space in Midtown, play the call, play the CNBC financial commentary afterwards. It's basically a sport event anyways. If enough people are interested, this could be fun. Comment or DM. And so it's just funny. Everyone is watching this. And so, again, we're going to be watching this as well, as it's going to be a big driver for the markets. But with that said, if you made it this far in this video, I want to do something fun, and I want to go ahead and do the final analysis on Nvidia stock. And so let's go ahead and get to it. So we talked a bit about Nvidia stock, why there's this kind of bullish sentiment behind it, and what are some things that we're going to want to watch for in the earnings and how this could impact the market. But at the end of the day, we don't know what the earnings call is going to look like. But what we can do is do our trusty analysis with the magic 8-ball. So let's go ahead and all together just ask a question. Is Nvidia stock going to hit new all-time highs by Friday, right? This is a very important part of the analysis. So, of course, you got to shake it real good, right? And it says, outlook not so good. We'll have to find out.